Hello, guys. I'll save the introduction because we do it later in the actual interview. However, this is part of a initiative called Science in the Legislative, where essentially we're trying to get different people in different spots of the Pennsylvania legislature to give their perspective on different scientific issues facing Pennsylvania. Today, we'll be interviewing Representative Lindsay Powell, the 21st District, particularly a district around Pittsburgh. So we have several questions lined up for her, and myself as well as Alex will be addressing them with her.
Looking forward to the discussion that we're about to have. We're going to dive into public policy, MPA, some other questions regarding infrastructure, and also some technology innovation. So hope you enjoy.
My name is State Representative Lindsay Powell. I have the honor of representing the 21st District in Allegheny County, which includes parts of the city of Pittsburgh, as well as the municipalities of Shaler, Millvale, Etna, and Reserve Township.
Perfect. Yeah, nice to meet you as well. I guess we'll kind of give a brief introduction. I'm Anthony, president of Allegheny Science Policy Group here at the University of Pittsburgh, and I will be one of the two interviewers today.
Wonderful.
And Alex, I'm secretary of ASPG, and I'll be the other interviewer for you. Looking forward to discussing some of the relevant science policy issues in PA.
Wonderful.
And I will say we're going to mostly steer. I know there's been a lot of stuff recently on the federal government side. We're going to mostly steer clear of that, particularly because we're more focused on the state side, and that is a very evolving issue. So I guess we'll hop right into it. So I think our first question here is one about public health, particularly when it comes to opioids. So the Attorney General's website refers to opioids as Pennsylvania's #1 public health issue, and the Department of Health actually estimates that in 2023 alone, Pennsylvania was dying every 2 hours from an opioid overdose. What actions or policies, if any, do you think you would take to lower the overdose deaths in Pennsylvania?
Sure. So this issue in particular is something that my district cares a lot about, making sure that we have accessible public health options for all. A bill that I'm working on that I'm very proud of is with Chairman Struzzi, the chairman of appropriations from the Republican side of the legislature, on a safe syringe program. It speaks to the reality that for people who use drugs, oftentimes because of their drug use and drug use disorders, they're not always connected to the right services, whether that's to help them, address their substance use issue or other subsequent issues that may happen with that person, whether that's health or, directly related to their health or housing or anything else. And so Pennsylvania is one of the states, unfortunately, where a safe syringe program is not enabled by the state. A lot of programs operate kind of under the radar, but this legislation would bring it to the forefront and allow for organizations that do safe needle exchange, but also connecting people to services to help them combat their opioid or substance addictions. Allow them to be directed to services and resources and support. And so we're actively working on legislation to help in these issues, and are really proud of the bipartisan effort that's been displayed thus far.
That's great.
Yeah,
sorry, go on, Alex.
I was going to say that is wonderful to hear. That actually transitions perfectly to the next question, because at the one level, we're very interested in getting the services out to people, but being a neuroscientist myself, I work with a number of people in the department that study opioid use disorder, alcohol use disorder, all these different mechanisms of addiction. And with that in mind, we're also interested in looking more at a research perspective, what your thoughts are on the research allocation that we currently have in the state, and what your thoughts are on where that can go next. So currently we have about 12.7 million in funding scientific research within the state alone as of the last fiscal year. And the question therefore is, do you support increasing, maintaining, or reducing this allocation? And which projects or areas would you prioritize with future funding?
It's a great question. So for us, research is incredibly important to not just make the argument on why funding certain programs is important, but also it's important um, information at our fingertips to legislate to meet the people that we serve. Um, in terms of what type of research to fund, I'm not quite sure. I think that this is where, as a legislator, I lean on community expertise. When it comes to substance use and substance abuse issues, there are trusted organizations in Western PA that I lean on to help educate and inform our legislative decision making. Prevention Point, in particular, we lean on obviously our county Department of Health and Human Services, our state Department of Health and Human Services, because they're the experts and the folks on the ground realizing, in real time what trends that need to be studied more or solutions that they're seeing in other cities that might be beneficial to the folks that we serve here in Western PA. So I say I'm very deferential to providers and kind of frontline service providers to help us inform what type of research we fund and we encourage the state entities to do.
Do you see any major trends happening at this time with that in mind?
Major trends in opioid use or
no, in the state funding. So
what do you mean?
With these other parties in mind, the experts that you're referring to, any meetings where you've heard things? Are they thinking the funding should go in the future at at the state scale?
Yeah, so just to make sure that I'm answering the question as best as possible. The every group. So we're in the budget season right now, and that means that every organization is trying to advocate for their particular issue to be included in the budget as a funded program, as a to do research on a program. So we get a lot of different requests, different groups all over on what we should be funding, what we should be looking at. So there are a lot. I've got probably 25 requests on my desk for funding. So it varies deeply, but I'm happy to focus more on opioid use if that's of interest to you all. I'll say we talk to a lot of groups on harm reduction across the state and the syringe exchange program. Being able to fund that and enable those programs to operate safely is a top priority.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, definitely one of the biggest jobs for people like us is going in and advising legislatures on what they should allocate funding for. So definitely we understand there's a lot of different pull and push from every side about where money should go.
Yeah.
But moving from funding back to another very pertinent public health issue is abortion. Currently, abortion is not codified in the Pennsylvania state constitution. Some issues that might come up in this year's legislature is things like, one, codifying abortion rights, but also certain requirements on abortion clinics, as well as who can actually perform abortion care beyond just physicians. Are there any particular policies or actions that you wish to take to address this issue of access to abortion in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it's something that's obvious for our office is a deep concern, especially considering some of the changes that are happening at the federal level. For us, abortion is healthcare, full stop. It's the outside of, some of the conversations about, morality or what have you. Our office and our constituents believe overall very deeply that, it's a form of healthcare and we should be able to treat it as such. For us, there have been several legislators that have been for decades fighting to ensure that we're codifying access to reproductive health care, like Chairwoman Mary Jo Daley, like Representative Christine Howard. For us, there are pieces of this that we are seeing as an issue in our district and some of the kind of adjacent spaces that we represent, we just circulated a co-sponsorship memo on the FACE Act, basically allowing for clinics. You may be familiar if you go to abortion service provider. Some municipalities have a kind of 15-foot radius where you're not able to, where people are who are entering the clinic, you can't, and people are protesting, you can't go past that line. It's a rule that is, varies municipality to municipality. In Pennsylvania, we don't have any overarching legislation that ensures that people can go into these clinics unmolested. And so Megan Sharkey on my team has been working really diligently to help us in collaboration with Planned Parenthood, the Women's Law Project, and others to make sure that as we have the right and ability to seek, care at some of these facilities that provide abortion and abortion care, that people can go in and out of these spaces without being disturbed by protesters or anything else. And so that's a bill that we've been working on pretty diligently over the past few months, trying to make sure that on top of having access to reproductive freedom, we're able to actually go into and access these spaces freely as well.
Awesome. Thank you for the very in-depth answer on that.
Right. Yes, and I appreciate the perspective and the context because, to your point, access is one about at the legislature level and putting laws in place that you can, reach out for these services at all. But actually transitions perfectly into the next discussion, which is access in terms of transportation. So also being able to get to places that, some people might not be able to afford to have a car, and therefore they rely on public transportation as their daily form. And in that regard, we're interested in what technologies or improvements you are seeking to implement to improve the efficiency of public transportation and potentially decrease its costs. Do you have any particular thoughts on this issue? I believe you're on the Transportation Committee. So.
I am. Yeah, I was just appointed to the Transportation Committee, and I'm very excited about it. Even though I'm doing this interview in my car, I hate driving. And I only got a car, my first and only car in my 30s for this job, because there was no way that I would be able to travel, as quickly as and efficiently as I needed with public transportation. Before that, I was a frequent PRT user, carpooling, rideshare, bike, cycle, you name it. I think in order to have a vibrant city, it is imperative that you have a public transportation system that is safe, that's efficient, and that's accessible. What that means to me is making sure that we have routes that meet people's needs. Without getting too into the weeds, the Pittsburgh regional transit system is undergoing a massive overhaul of how the routes are put together here. It used to be that downtown Pittsburgh was the kind of heartbeat of the region. And so every bus line goes through downtown. And when it made sense for that to happen, it was a system that, again, spoke to kind of the hub and spoke model where no matter where you live, whether it was Lawrenceville, it was Oakmont, it was, Carnegie, at some point you probably wanted to go downtown. We're realizing that's not the case anymore, where Oakland and Lawrenceville and other spaces want to go. Our bus routes are reflective of where people want to go. Our bus system should be accessible enough that you are able to take it to work and back. You're able to, send your kids to school on it and go to your healthcare provider and see your girlfriends on the weekend. It's our system doesn't meet those needs quite yet, and it's largely because we have a major deficiency. PRT actually has one of the highest fare rates of the nation. And so it's not that we're not charging enough. It's not that people don't use it enough. It's that we haven't invested in the system enough. And so with PRT and other advocates, we are within this budget trying to advocate for a significant investment in the Pittsburgh regional transit system that will help us not just keep our head above water, but make sure that we are putting money into a system that will yield better outcomes for all Pittsburghers.
Of course, yeah, I'm also a frequent PRT and bicyclist myself, so
Yeah.
very near and dear to my heart when it comes to public transportation and accessibility. And to that point, I've seen these changes starting to be enacted ever since they made a number of public memos about the route changes and bringing up, the university line as opposed to all of the buses going downtown, like you were saying before with the spoke approach. And I think the other major change that I'm noticing is when it comes to technology, the shift from gas powered and propane powered to more, electric buses. So I think that's becoming more and more apparent as I walk out and see it's all electric on the PRT buses now. So yeah, a lot of good innovation and progress being made from what I've been seeing. So
Absolutely.
I think Alex, for your next one, the aging question.
yes, of course. So also thinking about transportation, another thing I'm passionate about as a neuroscientist studying neurodegeneration is aging in the community. And one facet of that is access to transportation. But as a more general question, since you're a member of the Aging and Adult Services Committee, what policies, if any, would you take to address the greater burden that is placed on Pennsylvania's healthcare infrastructure as the elderly population grows in proportion to the youth?
Yeah, aging is such an interesting topic when it comes to like legislation and policy. Pennsylvania, I believe, is second in the nation of having a share of adults over the age of 65. And yet, when it comes to policies, programs, solutions that particularly address, they've been calling it the silver tsunami. I don't think that we have enough. For me, one of the issues that is very important to my constituents and one of the kind of things that we see often is housing when it comes to allowing seniors to age in place and age in their community. We see that there are better health outcomes, that there are neighbors to check in on them, that they have routines and socialization that allows them to stay active and keep their mind agile. And so we have a housing shortage as it is, but when it comes to housing for seniors, thinking about, floor plans that are more accessible, less stairs, and more deeply embedded in community, that you can get to a grocery store, get to a pharmacy, get to a park easily. We don't have a lot of that. And so while it's not obviously the end all be all, one single solution needed to make sure that we're caring for our elderly, more programs targeted to keeping seniors aging in place and aging in their home is really important. Our office is championing our whole homes repair bill. It was a piece of legislation from last legislative session that my predecessor introduced from a program that I created, my team created in the city of Pittsburgh. So it's a really, I think it's been interesting to see how amplified it's become now that we're seeing, the need and interest to invest in our seniors so that they're able to, stay in our communities, stay in our neighborhoods. But whole homes repair, the idea is that for seniors, we would be able to give grant and loan dollars for them to be able to make those small repairs to make it habitable. So whether it's a, new roof, whether it's, I never know the word for this, but that little, rather than taking the stairs, that little,
Airlift thing.
Oh,
yeah, the
mhm,
stair lift, things like
Yeah.
that, stair lifts,
mhm.
making it more accessible, little tweaks that, but for an investment of cash, a senior would not be able to make. And so it's an important program that was highly utilized in not just Western PA, but across the across the Commonwealth, and we're hoping to replicate and expand that work so that more seniors are able to benefit and stay in their neighborhoods as they would like.
It's definitely awesome to hear that you have such a set plan. Particularly, I think the silver tsunami is a great way to put it. Um, but I think that really ties into one of our next questions. We've been talking a lot about infrastructure as well as funding, but more broadly, are there particular scientific or technology industries that you see having the greatest future employment potential in Pennsylvania? And what policies, if any, would you take to try to facilitate the growth of these industries, particularly in the Pittsburgh area?
Hmm. So I have been too bad my chief of staff isn't here. He would like roll his eyes, but I have been on this kick of life sciences. I think it is a fascinating example of how to tie together some of Pittsburgh's strong suits when we're talking about the talent that we produce from Pitt, CMU, Duquesne, RMU. When we talk about our history of advanced manufacturing, and then when we talk about the ability to grow and expand physically in spaces, we have all the components to make for a really strong life sciences industry. In the 21st District, I have the honor of representing so many technologists in Robotics Row, in the Strip District in Lawrenceville, and other, life sciences, software, autonomous vehicle companies that have landed and expanded in Pennsylvania. In the governor's budget address recently, he spoke about wanting to invest in more innovation across the state, but particularly life sciences. And I think it's a opportunity for Western PA and for the Pittsburgh area to really think about how to connect these dots. I think life sciences is a really great example of a innovative industry that can be more equitable. You have the technologists that have the bright idea that have might have gone to some of our fine universities, but also there's an opportunity for more than livable wages with mechanics and the advanced manufacturing piece and people who are actually able to create the widgets. So sometimes I feel like in the innovation conversations for people, they don't think about it as a workforce strategy because it seems very exclusive. It seems just kind of elitist for the technologists who've only been in the hallowed halls of academia. But in order for those ideas to translate, you need people who are able to build and create and manufacture. And that's been the backbone of Western PA. And so being able to tie together these two fields, I think could be a really wonderful opportunity to expand workforce goals for not just technologists and folks who in academia, but for folks who might have worked in the steel industry or were mechanics, what have you, to be a part of the innovation field as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely me and Alex as people in academia, one thing that you don't really notice till you're in is that it's not just like the fancy people in suits. There is a lot of things that go behind it and a lot of different people in a lot of different fields that actually facilitate any research or any scientific endeavor. So it's definitely a whole community-based industry.
Absolutely.
And I think on the topic of something like life sciences, you particularly have a background in sociology. And I was wondering how that this has affected your perspective on policy making, particularly when it comes to issues involving like mental health, crime, and education. And if there's one of those maybe you want to really dig into, by all means.
Yeah, the sociology is the study of society, and so as someone who was interested in government and politics, it made a lot of sense to study soc. I think poli sci, at least my undergrad university was very focused on history, which is important, but it was really interesting and important to me to understand why societies are structured the way that they are, and kind of use that people focused, society focused approach in my policy making. And so it informs all the legislating that we do. When we think, I think our office tries to think about the bigger picture. And so when it comes to, supporting or creating or proposing legislation, we always want to think about what impacts it'll have on society writ large. So I don't know if there's, you know, we do that no matter if we're talking about education, whether we're talking about workforce, whether we're talking about, substance use and abuse. how does this piece of legislation fit into what we know about society as our snapshot of society, and how do we make sure that our approach is always people focused in its solutions as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. There's a lot of people focus, like AJ said, inside and outside of academia. It's more about the people. It's not just about like the PIs and the one person with that one bright idea. It's the infrastructure that you're building underneath and bolstering up these ideas to the next level. Same thing with the manufacturing concept and needing all of these pieces to come together. With science as a system, though, there's been declining public confidence in being able to be the precipice for these next innovations, treatments, what have you, new processes, new jobs, etc. And that's how we see it as scientists, but the public doesn't necessarily see that all the time. So the question we have for you is, how do you think you can leverage your position to restore public trust in scientific institutions? And in what ways do you think that's most lacking at this point, if at all?
Yeah, for us, it's just showing up. If you tell, I've been someone who's worked in government, and never thought for themselves that they would be an elected official. I was always a staffer, and I felt very comfortable there. And as someone who's done every single role within, a local elected's office, whether that's, intern, casework, scheduling, chief of staff, policy manager, throughout all those roles, showing up for people and following through is important. The best offices that inspire the most confidence between, their constituent and the, elected official, or even the office, is when you show up for people and you do what you say you're going to do. And that gets down to even like, we told Mrs. Robinson we were going to call her back, so we got to call her back. Even if it is the bad news that she didn't want to hear and she's going to cuss us up and down, if you told her you were going to call her back, you call her back. And for, us, what we try to do is, uphold that agreement between our constituents, making sure that as they reach out to us with concerns and complaints, that we're visible, that we're responsive. And it's also just being in community. People trust you because they see you at the grocery store, and they see you at the pharmacist, and, they see you at the, not just the flashy, fun ribbon cutting and groundbreaking celebrations, but they also see you at the fish fry and the spaghetti dinner fundraiser. And it's not in our office, it's not, a thing to kind of tick off, but we want to be there because you want to be in community with people to understand, why, how this policy may impact people, or, really what the kind of thinking is on the ground. And so being visible, being responsive, and doing what you say you're going to do are ways that you can start to build trust with communities that, for a long time, especially in the communities that I serve, I've got some very neglected river towns that haven't seen investment or care or attention in decades. So we're very mindful about how we show up, and the frequency at which we do, to inspire and earn that confidence and trust in people.
Yeah, hear that perspective. Research definitely has a complicated past in some sense. So reinstilling the current state and showing that, we are part of the community. We're fighting for the same things at the end of the day. So that's really, I think, what it will come down to in the end as well. Same thing, like you said, same thing with public officers. You're for the community. It's not just about being on TV at this point and, making this address or something. It's about actually being around, listening to people, and getting to the next, in this case, bill, legislation, in our case, discovery or what have you. So it's important to keep that in mind. And that's something that we try and do more whenever it comes to civic engagement. It's not just talking with you guys at the legislative and judicial levels, and it's also about community involvement. So getting back to our roots and building up a network that will then see us as people again, as opposed to mad scientists, maybe. So
yeah.
Well, speaking of the community, one thing that affects many communities, particularly in Pennsylvania, is gun violence, unfortunately. In 2022, the CDC ranked us as the fifth highest state for gun deaths. Considering this number, as well as the fact that there's a growing threat of ideologically motivated violence, what policies, if any, would you support to reduce firearm-related violence in the Commonwealth?
Yeah, when I first was elected, I had the opportunity of going to the White House. At the time, it was a convening by then Vice President Kamala Harris on gun violence and gun violence prevention across the country. And I got to meet with other legislators to talk about some of the interventions that they had experienced or that they had implemented in their communities. And it was a really great experience because I got to see what worked and what didn't work, and what investments we should be making in PCCD, which is the office that oversees kind of gun violence and crime prevention. At the very micro level, the local level, violence interrupters have been critical to Pittsburgh's ability to bring down some of the violent uh, gun uh, gun deaths that we've seen in the city, and building up our office of community health and safety, which I got to be a part of when I worked at the city of Pittsburgh. But again, elevating members of our community that have been, informally violence interrupters, elevating them to have the resources and support that they need to do that work on a kind of official level has been really, really impactful. And so that was one of the things that I got to talk about, at the White House and shared what Pittsburgh had done. But there are so many other solutions that we could be implementing to make sure that people are safe in our communities and we're reducing the risk of gun violence in Pittsburgh.
Awesome, man. It's also definitely a great thing to hear that you're working with the previous administration as well as other people around the country to try to solve this. Because obviously, this is not a Pennsylvania specific issue. This is unfortunately an issue that's insidious to the whole nation. So that's definitely good to hear that, collaboration between multiple different areas.
Yeah, on all fronts. A lot of cities face the same issues. Same thing with gun violence, same thing with the opioid crisis across, like the Rust Belt, for example. So
Yeah.
it's important to have those collaborative discussions. And with that in mind, though, of all the things going on, just to recap all that we've discussed so far, what would you think is the greatest issue that you would first want to tackle that's facing PA?
Oh, there's so many, and they're all kind of intersectional. But for us, it's housing and like economic development. I believe very deeply that without a safe and dignified space to lay your head, it's hard to think about, having other positive outcomes. We have a massive housing shortage here in Western PA. And I do believe we have all the tools to address it. So housing and equitable economic development are top of mind for us.
I think Maslow would agree.
Yeah.
And then I think just to kind of close up this interview, because we mostly gone through all of our questions, I guess what made you want to run for public office? How did you get into the public sphere? And then maybe do you have any advice for anyone that would want to pursue a similar career in politics?
Yeah, I appreciate both of you, your time and your thoughtful questions. For me, I got involved in politics because my parents took me to a protest. I told the story actually last night, but my parents took me to my first protest. It was when I grew up in New York. It was before the Barclay Center, and they had used eminent domain to help to build the center. And we were concerned that people would be displaced, and going to the protest, I was like, what? This is so interesting. Like, what's happening here? Like, this is wild. And even thinking about, process and going to, zoning meetings and everything else, it was just this whole world of these are the decision makers that are getting to make this massive, life changing, life altering decision for communities. And all of us, I think that we're part of these protests and these whatever, we're like, whoa, like that existed, like what's like that, this whole process exists. And so it was such an eye-opening experience that I really became dedicated to understanding how all of it worked, and which was why I've been very grateful to be a staffer for so many other elected officials that I believe in, and believe in their vision for the world. I wanted to be able to understand these systems so that I could be a better advocate for my neighbors, the communities that I grew up in, and now for the 21st district. And so I pinch myself every day. It's an honor to be trusted with this work. And that's really what it is, that people trust you to do this work. And I'm grateful for the team that we've built in the 21st district, who are just as dedicated to making sure that we've got a better Pittsburgh, for all of us. And so for those inspired or interested in doing, government work, it is it can be very difficult and taxing, but there is nothing more rewarding than being able to see, triumphs, as little as making sure that you know, the seniors in your neighborhood get their property tax and rent rebate, or as big as, being able to land, a company in your district that's, creating 400 new jobs. We've been able to have victories at the micro level and the macro level that really speak to how together as a community we can build a better tomorrow. So I hope that everyone's inspired at some point to go into government, because it really is one of the few jobs where you get to see your work in front of you, and I assume for folks in the medical field as well, you get to see your work in front of you. But it's an honor, and I hope that more people get involved in this space.
Awesome.
Since we have a little extra time, I'll just throw in one last question. So thinking outside of PA and outside of the country, you did mention helping to make a better world. So I would really like to hear your thoughts on, given the current, global climate regarding health, the US leaving the WHO, leaving WHO, stuff like that, like what your biggest thoughts are for what needs to happen when it comes to global health.
It's a big question.
Might as well throw it in. Why not?
I don't, when it comes to global health, I think it's trying to democratize innovation. I think one of the things that I was a Fulbright scholar, and I got to live in Malaysia, which was fantastic. But one of the things that I was really frustrated by, I lived in a rural fishing village 7 hours from the capital. One of the things I was really frustrated by was like how some of the things that I had access to back home in New York and Pittsburgh, where have you, just they weren't accessible anywhere else. And so I don't pretend to have any of the answers in this space, because it's not my area of expertise, or, but I think that being able to have more accessible health options is critical, and that takes building not just like the built infrastructure, but the like health systems in other countries, so that there's agency and independence in people's experiences. But that's a great question that I'll definitely chew over for the rest of the day. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that experience with us. That's
Yeah.
a very unique experience, being able to go and live in Malaysia. So I'm
It's
sure you get a lot of perspective by that travel with others.
Yeah. But thank you both for your time and your thoughtful questions. If there's anything else you think of, feel free to give us send us an email with anything else, and we can set up another time. But congratulations to you both. And this sounds like a really cool project. So let us know how it comes out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for the time.